My name is Horatio. I am 73. And I no longer exist. Not physically, no. My heart still beats, my lungs still breathe. I even go out to the store sometimes, careful not to step on the slippery autumn leaves that cover the sidewalk by my old fence. But no one sees me. And if they do, it is only as a burden, a line at the pharmacy that must be skipped because grandfather forgot why he came. I live alone, in a house that smells of wood, old books and broken promises. Once this house was full of noise, me, my wife, our children, guests, partners, laughter, arguments, toasts. Now just a kettle beeping on the stove, a blanket with knots and a TV that I turned off the sound 2 years ago. Not because I can't hear, but because I'm tired of listening to the emptiness he broadcasts. The children. They're all on the job. My son runs some kind of fund, he's always in meetings. My daughter is a marketing director, lives in another city. I was proud of them. I gave everything for them. And now when I call, I hear the phrase, "Dad, come on another time?" I just have a meeting. My grandchildren are good children. They come from time to time. They hug. They bring something. But the conversation is as if according to a script. "How are you, Grandpa? Are you eating something? Maybe I should give you a new phone." They don't listen to the answers. They do their duty. And quickly run back to their own world. In the store, they don't thank me for my purchase. In the clinic, they look down on me when I ask what a term on a form means. At the bank, they speak loudly and slowly, as if I don't understand the words, not indifference. I became a shadow in my own life. And in this shadow, I began to think. Not immediately. At first there was only a feeling, something like rotting decomposition. As if you had been buried alive, but still left a breathing valve. Then, something like pain appeared. Not physical. I was used to the pain in my back, to the joints that creaked like old hinges. It was the pain of a meaningless presence. The pain of a living being that was unnecessary. And then, fire appeared. Small, like a spark in a furnace. But I felt it. The first time the nurse said, "Take this away, he can't find his way." I looked straight into her eyes. And said nothing. But something inside clenched into a fist. I didn't forget who I was. I remember standing in front of a bank and guaranteeing a loan with my own property. How I signed agreements that hundreds of people depended on. How I took responsibility when others ran away. I disappeared for them. But not for myself. In the drawer next to the bed is an old notebook. It has hundreds of pages. It used to be my strategic diary when I was running a business. Now it's the notebook of a silent observer. And I started writing again. Names. Events. Phrases. Reactions. This is not revenge. This is memory. But memory has an interesting property. If you light it correctly, it becomes fuel. I'm still silent. But I'm no longer forgiving. I used to not enter a room, I showed up. It felt like the air changed its weight a little. People became more careful with their words. Everyone wanted my approval, or feared my silence. I wasn't cruel. I just had weight. In the 90s, I didn't run away like many do. I went to the market, empty-handed, but with a head that thought faster than most. I bought, sold, merged. I put people in teams, broke up toxic partnerships, built from scratch. Money didn't come easy then. But I didn't chase it. I built a structure, not a profit. And it paid off. I remember the day I came home with an envelope full of cash. I put it on the table. My wife silently wiped her hands on her apron and started crying. It was our first free month, after years of survival. I promised myself they wouldn't endure what I endured. And I kept my word. My daughter wanted to study abroad. I sold a third of the business. My son had an idea for his own startup. I became the first investor. When it failed, I didn't scold him. I said, "You have the right to make mistakes. But you don't have the right to stop." I had enemies. And friends who betrayed me. One of my closest friends stole millions and went to Cyprus. I didn't sue. I just waited for his new partners to see who he was. A year later he called me, begging for advice. I said, "The price is silence. And you won't bear it." I wasn't sinless. But I was fair. And I valued loyalty terribly. I remember those times not with nostalgia, but with a cold awareness of the scale that lived in me. I wasn't just a businessman. I was a person to whom people went to solve problems. I took on other people's burdens. I held the sky. And now I am a hunched old man, addressed as if he were furniture. Now my phone has been silent for weeks. Friends? Some in the hospital, some in the grave. Some, like me, have simply been erased from the map of reality. Young people live in the here and now. It seems to them that life is an endless stream. History for them is a photo album in the grandmother's mezzanine. And I am a part of that history that they forgot to read. Sometimes I open old documents. I have an archive at home. Contracts, notes, personal letters, even newspaper clippings. Everything that shows, I was. I did. I mattered. Sometimes I think, maybe I didn't teach them the price of loss for nothing? Maybe I should have shown that the world is not only glass, but also the weight of decisions. But maybe it's not too late. A thought pops into my head: if I once built systems, why not build something different now? People think that time has burned everything. But it only took away the shine. And beneath the shine is steel. I'm still here. And maybe I'll be who I was again. Everyone thinks that old age is a big explosion, a heart attack, a fall, dementia. But in reality it is like rust. It doesn't burst, it seeps, slowly, drop by drop, seeping into everyday details, eating away not the body but the dignity. I first felt it when I called my son to ask if he could come over and help change the light bulb in the hallway. He replied curtly, "Dad, are you serious? What, you don't have any hands?" A pause. Silence. Then, "Okay, I can't right now. Maybe next week." I didn't say anything. I bought a ladder. I climbed up, fell, cut my hand. It was nothing serious. But it wasn't the fall that hurt, it was the voice on the phone that went out as easily as a candle flame goes out in the wind. My grandson arrived a week later. I tried to talk. I showed him my old photo album, where I am in the background of the first office, where we opened a branch in Kharkiv, where my wife and I hold the Person of the Year certificate. He smiled, then slid his finger down the page, and asked, "Who is this?" "It's me." "Yeah." I thought it was some actor. He didn't look me in the eye. He was texting someone on his phone. Then he asked, "Do you have Wi-Fi? Because 4G is barely working here." And again I didn't wait for an answer. I just left. I went to the post office to get a receipt. The girl behind the glass said, "Pension?" "No, well, then under window number 3. I just, next. And then I felt that I wasn't a person, but a mass. Extra air. A ghost with faded eyes. In the hospital, where I came with chest pain, a young doctor examined me in 3 minutes. Then he told the nurse, "This one can be registered for observation. Let him lie down." "Old man." "I'm here," I answered. "Yes, grandfather, yes. Everything will be fine." I didn't say another word. But I remembered the name on the badge. And the date. And the hospital. I left the supermarket. My hands were shaking, the bag tore, the apples rolled across the asphalt. I stood by the road, trying to pick them up. People were walking by. One woman looked, then quickened her pace. A couple of teenagers laughed. I didn't say anything. But a thought came to my mind. Now I know what indifference looks like. In faces, names, details. In the evening I opened my notebook. New lines. Dr. Sivikin. 5:25 p.m. Clinic number 4. Cashier. Post office. Window 1. Grandson. Doesn't know who grandfather was. Doesn't look me in the eye. Son. What's wrong with you, no hands? This is not a list of enemies. This is a map. Each of these events, each word, is like a small nail hammered into the coffin that society is trying to put me in. But I am not lying down. I am standing. What is strange is that I no longer feel resentment. Instead, I am focused. As if before an important game. A silent anticipation of the upcoming move. They think I am weak. But I am not weak. I am attentive. It was a normal fall. My foot caught on the curb, and I, along with 2 packages, fell face down. A plastic container of eggs exploded nearby, like a miniature tragedy. A coat button flew off onto the asphalt. My cane rolled away. I lay there for a few seconds, feeling my elbow throb and listening to laughter. Somewhere behind me, 3 young people, either teenagers or adults with childish faces, came out laughing. It's his own fault that he's running away from home. Nobody needs him, and he's still climbing. Nobody. No. Needs him. These words, they didn't just offend. They unlocked something. Something deep, ancient. Dark not in the sense of anger, but in the sense of clarity. A mechanism clicked inside me. Like an old safe that finally opened after decades. I got up on my own. Slowly. My hands were shaking, but my back was straight. My eyes were clear. I no longer tried to appear soft. I no longer had anyone to convince. I came home and for the first time in many years I opened the safe. It was old, mechanical, no digital code. Inside was a dusty Nokia phone with buttons. It turned on. Next to it was an old black notebook. It wasn't just notes. There were diagrams. People. Networks. I used to call it passive security. Now I'm activating it. I wiped the dust off the hard drive. There were archives of correspondence, legal documents, old debts. Not financial ones, but human ones. Once I saved the company of a lawyer who now runs a large firm. I pulled a woman out of bankruptcy who now runs a department at the Ministry of Justice. I helped my son's classmate, he is now a media manager on one of the central TV channels. I have never asked for anything in return. Until today. I found them. I didn't call. I sent a short message. Horatio. The time has come. And they all responded. Immediately. Some with gratitude. Some with trembling in the text. All with respect. Because they remembered. I didn't shout. I didn't go out into the street with slogans. I simply turned on the game. I am a former player who has returned to the board. And the first pieces have already moved. Small blue diamond public exposure of the fund manager for using inside information from an anonymous source who is tied to my son. Small blue diamond, my grandson's company lost an important contract due to a technical leak of documents. Only 3 people had access. But they all knew that he was to blame. Small blue diamond, those who once laughed in the hospital received a check. Unexpected, detailed. The nurse was transferred. The doctor was given a disciplinary order for humiliating a patient. Anonymous complaint. With evidence. I didn't leave a signature. I didn't raise my voice. I just became myself again. I've been building systems all my life, now I've learned to take them apart. Quietly. Balanced. Like an architect who went back to the old plan and decided, this building must crack. And you know what's the strangest thing? I didn't feel sorry. For anyone. They built their own traps. I just turned on the light so they could finally see where they were. I'm not a monster. I'm a reminder. What I started was no longer revenge in the usual sense. I didn't smoke, I didn't break, I didn't scream. I was restoring balance. Everyone who had once turned away was forced to look in the mirror again. And the mirror no longer lied. My son was the first to feel the blow. The financial fund he managed, the same one for which I once risked everything, suddenly became a figure in a journalistic investigation. Everything was within the law. The data was open. The confirmation was documentary. I simply reminded the journalist where to dig. And he dug with excitement. On the TV, which had been silent for years, I turned on the sound for the first time in a long time. And I heard a familiar name, my son's name, under the phrase. Possible violations of ethical norms and conflict of interest. I was not happy. But something inside calmed down. He didn't fall. He was only slightly bent. And now, finally, he called. Dad, is that you? I didn't answer. I just hung up. Because the game wasn't over. My grandson, who didn't care who I was, suddenly found himself at the center of a scandal, a data leak at his startup. No one directly blamed him. But the investors disappeared. The contract was cancelled. I just suggested the right combination of keys to the right person in cybersecurity. I once paid for his education. He didn't forget. Now my grandson started coming. Without a phone in his hand. With the words, Grandpa, can we just sit? I was silent. But I nodded. Silence is no longer emptiness. It is context. Meanwhile, somewhere on the sidelines, positions were disappearing. Those who scoffed were losing confidence. The cashier at the post office is now polite to everyone. The doctor at the clinic publicly apologized for harsh words in front of all the elderly patients. I didn't break people. I just showed them who they had become. And the scariest thing wasn't that someone was losing their job. No. The scariest thing was when they began to understand that no one else but themselves was responsible for this. I was not alone in this silence. I had allies. People I had once helped, and now I only reminded them. True gratitude is action. They didn't ask. Why? They asked. When? Now I was no longer a grandfather. I was no longer the former. I was no longer a shadow. I had become an architect. Silent, invisible, but unstoppable. And the house I lived in, the same old one, with wooden windows and creaky stairs, had changed. The tension was back. The phone rang more often. Someone knocked on the door. And I didn't open it. Because now it was my time. It was my turn to speak, not with words, but with the silence they had taught me to endure. Now, they were learning to endure it themselves. On Sunday, they all gathered. I didn't call. They showed up themselves, son, daughter, grandchildren, even my former son-in-law, whom I hadn't seen in 15 years. They stood in my living room, as if in confession. They took turns saying things that sounded like repentance, but more like an attempt to regain ground under their feet. The son said, Dad, we didn't know how hard it was for you. We were distant. I'm sorry. I looked at him. Not with hatred. Not with anger. But not with love either. The way an investor looks at a person he once entrusted with a project, and who neglected it. The granddaughter took out a card on which she wrote, I made a collage of your photos. You are a hero, Grandpa. These words were honest. And they hurt more than any humiliation. Because now they remembered. But not of their own free will, but out of fear. I didn't say anything to them. I just sat down in my chair silently. And looked each of them in the eye. This look lasted seconds. But they lowered their eyes first. One by one. And I realized the game was over. That evening I sat down at my notebook. My hands were no longer shaking. The last entry, underscore. I did not punish. I reminded. Old age is not withering. It is observation. This is the moment when you no longer want anything, and that is why you can do everything. I do not want thanks. I do not want flowers. I want each of them to learn to see. Because the greatest tragedy is not that you are ignored, but that people have learned not to notice each other. I was a shadow. Now I am their memory. And memories do not disappear. They wait. And when necessary, they return. Underscore I closed the notebook. I turned off the TV. The house is silent again. But now it is different. It is not about loneliness. It is about completion. I have not become good. I didn't forgive. But I didn't hate either. Because the greatest strength is not in rage. It's in smiling, knowing that everything could have been different if they had looked at you in time.
Subscribe and like this video, more interesting revenge stories of elderly people coming soon.